In the year 325, hundreds of Christian bishops traveled to the city of Nicaea under the order of Constantine the Great for arguably the most important meeting in Christian history. At the center of the controversy was a question that sounded simple: who is Jesus Christ? And this question is what Christology revolves around. Is the Son eternally God, or was he the greatest being God had ever created? The argument became so intense that the Roman Emperor Constantine called bishops from across the empire together to settle it.
The result was the First Council of Nicaea, the council that produced the original Nicene Creed and became recognized by most major branches of Christianity as the First Ecumenical Council. But to understand why the council happened, we have to go back a few years. In the early 4th century, a priest in Alexandria named Arius became involved in a theological dispute with his bishop, Alexander of Alexandria. Both sides believed in God the Father and in Jesus Christ. The disagreement was over the relationship between them. Now Arius thought that the Son did not exist eternally in the same way that the Father did. The Son was extraordinarily exalted. He existed before the rest of creation, and everything else had been created through him. But Arius still regarded the Son as ultimately deriving his existence from the Father. In other words, the Son was not eternal in exactly the same sense as the Father. Arius's opponents believed this undermined the divinity of Christ. If the Son could at some point have not existed, they argued, then he could not truly share the eternal divine nature of the Father. The controversy spread far beyond Alexandria. Bishops began taking sides, letters were exchanged across the empire, and what started as a local theological dispute became a major division within Christianity. At almost the exact same time, the political situation of the Roman Empire was changing dramatically. Constantine had become the dominant Roman emperor, and Christianity had recently emerged from periods of imperial persecution. Before then, Christianity was a religion for women and slaves. Constantine wanted religious unity within the empire, and the growing controversy surrounding Arius threatened that unity. So in 325, Constantine summoned bishops to the city of Nicaea, located in modern-day Turkey. This is important because Constantine did not invent Christian doctrine. The theological dispute had already existed before the council, and the bishops themselves debated the question. Constantine called the council and participated in its proceedings, but the controversy being discussed came from within the church itself. Eusebius of Caesarea, who was actually present, describes Constantine attending and addressing the assembled bishops. Tradition commonly remembers 318 bishops at Nicaea, although ancient accounts vary on the exact number. These bishops came primarily from the eastern regions of the Roman Empire, although representatives from the west were also present. Among the important figures were Alexander of Alexandria, Eusebius of Nicomedia, Eusebius of Caesarea, and Hosius of Cordoba. There was also a young deacon from Alexandria named Athanasius. He was not yet a bishop, but he would eventually become one of the most famous defenders of Nicene theology. Now the debate was that the basic problem facing the council was this: how would Christians say that there is only one God while also worshiping Jesus Christ as divine? The bishops needed language precise enough to exclude the idea that the Son was merely a created being. Eventually, the council used one Greek word that became enormously important: homoousios. It means something like of the same essence or of the same substance. The creed declared the Son to be begotten, not made, and of one substance with the Father. That distinction was crucial. The Son is begotten of the Father, but he is not a creature made by the Father. Whatever it means for the Father to be God, the council was saying, the Son possesses that same divine nature. The creed also condemned statements associated with Arian theology, including the idea that there had been a time when the Son did not exist. The surviving Nicene formula and its anathemas preserve these theological boundaries. The creed produced at Nicaea was not exactly like the same Nicene Creed that many Christians recite today. The version commonly used in churches developed from the creed associated with the later Council of Constantinople in 381. But the foundation was established at Nicaea. The council confessed Jesus Christ as truly divine and rejected the idea that he was simply the highest of God's creatures. This is why Nicaea became such an important moment in development of Christian Trinitarian theology. It did not attempt to explain every detail of the Trinity. In fact, major theological arguments continued for decades afterward, but it established an extremely important boundary. The Son belongs on the creator side of the creator-creature distinction. He is not part of creation. And it wasn't just about Arius. Although the Arian controversy is what Nicaea is famous for, it wasn't the only thing discussed. The council also dealt with practical matters of church government and discipline. It issued 20 canons dealing with subjects involving bishops, clergy, ordination, and church organization. The bishops also addressed the controversies surrounding the date of Easter. Different Christian communities had been using different methods of determining when Easter should be celebrated. Nicaea attempted to establish greater unity in the celebration, although differences in calculating this date would not appear immediately afterward. So Nicaea wasn't simply a meeting where everyone showed up, voted on whether Jesus was God, and went home. It was an attempt to resolve several disputes after affecting a rapidly growing church. Now what happened to Arius? The council rejected Arius' theology, and him and several of his supporters were condemned, and imperial authority was used to enforce the council's decision. But this is where the story gets complicated. Nicaea did not end the Arian controversy, not even close. Some bishops who had accepted the council later disputed how its terminology should be understood. Different theological factions gained and lost imperial support. Bishops were removed from their sees, others were restored. And Athanasius, who later became Bishop of Alexandria, would be exiled multiple times during the decades of controversy that followed. Even Constantine's own position towards some of Arius' supporters changed after the council. So although Nicaea produced a creed, the theological battle continued throughout much of the 4th century. There are also several popular claims about Nicaea that aren't supported by the historical evidence. The council did not decide which books belonged in the Bible, it did not invent Christianity or the Trinity, and Constantine did not suddenly declare Jesus to be God for the first time in 325. Christians had been describing and worshiping Christ in divine terms centuries before Constantine. What Nicaea did was much more specific. It responded to a controversy over how the Son relates to the Father and established a language intended to protect the belief that the Son is genuinely and eternally divine. The aftermath was that the controversy would continue until a major council met at Constantinople in 381. There, Nicene theology was reaffirmed and developed further, particularly in relation to the Holy Spirit. Together, the councils of Nicaea and Constantinople became fundamental for what would become classical Trinitarian Christianity. Today, the First Council of Nicaea is accepted as an ecumenical council by the Eastern Orthodox Church, Roman Catholic Church, Oriental Orthodox churches, and many Protestant churches. And the theological principle at the center of the council remains part of mainstream Christianity. Jesus Christ is not a created intermediary standing somewhere between God and creation. He is the eternal Son, begotten, not made, and of one essence with the Father. And that is why a theological argument that began in 4th century Alexandria eventually brought bishops from across the Roman world to Nicaea and changed the course of Christian history. Thanks for watching, and God bless.